LaTasha Seliby Perkins. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Family Medicine at Georgetown University School of Medicine. I am a family physician at MedStar Primary Care at Fort Lincoln, which is a training clinic. So I train family medicine physicians, medical students, as well as see my own patient panel. I have so many roles and hats I wear. One of them is wife, mother, daughter, sister, physician, educator, believer, and whenever I can make time, dancer. It was between medicine and dance, and I chose medicine, but being a dancer will always be a part of who I am. My Black birth story of hope, I like to think of it as kind of a play of sort with two acts. My first act would be the blessing that is my daughter, Gia Perkins. I was very lucky to be able to get pregnant with her without planning, just at the beautiful age of 37. But then around week 24, we started preterm labor without even knowing. So I ended up having to get an emergency cerclage, which shifted my world as a working mom. When a baby is growing in your uterus is getting bigger, but the opening to your uterus is the cervix. And the cervix, as the uterus gets bigger, it shortens and it thins out in preparation for labor. Sometimes the cervix is a little hyperactive. It decides to do that a bit earlier than it should. And so you get a stitch. A stitch is placed there to keep the cervix closed and to keep it as long as we can until the baby is viable and can live outside of the uterus. And so what it can mean is, because you have the stitch in your cervix that's shortening or thinning, it may mean you don't do the things you see in a normal pregnancy. I was on bed rest for a month and a half because they were so afraid that it would shorten too much and that we would go into labor before she was viable. So being a busybody, that was hard for me, right? And I had a family friend tell me, everything else you're responsible for, someone else can do. But growing this child is the only job that you're required to do at this time. And that is what gave me peace. And then I developed gestational diabetes and had to manage that with diet. Gestation means when you're pregnant, and diabetes is just what is diabetes mellitus, when your body doesn't regulate the sugar in your blood the way it should. And so sometimes you may have too much sugar in your blood, which means that you hang on to a lot of fluids, you aren't able to digest your food the way you should. Your pancreas is essentially not putting insulin out the way it should. So gestational diabetes means diabetes only in pregnancy. So once you have the baby, diabetes generally goes away, though sometimes about 50% of pregnant people that have gestational diabetes may later develop diabetes. So I understand when you have to change your diet, the challenges that come with that. Then she decided to change positions, so she was breech. That means the baby is not in the birthing position, which is head down, and you need it to be head down. And so I ended up getting a primary C-section because she did not change position, because she was a big baby with a big head. But she came, and we had already decided her name was going to be Gia Noel, but that Tuesday, right after a snowstorm named Gia came through, she came to this world in a very peaceful C-section that was planned. It definitely made it easier. It made it easier because I knew I delivered multiple babies myself, hundreds at that point, and I knew that it's not about you at that moment. It's about you living through your life-changing experience of birthing a child and getting your child here safely. So because I know the science of what could go wrong, and I understand that having a C-section wasn't the end of the world, the end of my birth plan, but as long as my baby was here safely, that was the most important part for me. So being a doctor and knowing all the things that could go wrong made it quite easy to shift my plan. Like I said, I had a plan. I wanted to breastfeed and have a nanny, and all this stuff was going to be great at home. But I started to develop anxiety and depression around lactation because I wasn't producing enough milk. And like, how am I failing my child that I can't produce enough milk? But that is when my mental health became kind of an issue for me. And so I struggled with anxiety to the point where I had to get on a medication. And then it was time to go back to work, finding a nanny and having one I felt comfortable with. I still was anxious going to work because I wasn't ready to leave my child. Like who's gonna be here for her? I had this generalized anxiety disorder around just not being with my child. But eventually with my family and friends, I was able to get past that. But the second act is when I wanted to give Gigi a brother or sister, something she asked for, something my husband wanted, something that I wanted. And I had to kind of battle infertility. But I like to use the word fertility because I don't like for people to say you're infertile, because you are not infertile. That's just a result of challenges. And so that's what I mean when I say infertility, or when I speak about fertility in general. And so we tried for 2 years, went to the fertility doctor, and they said, well, your hormones are great, your ovaries are making enough, you can keep trying naturally, or we can move towards IVF because of your age, because at this point I was 39. So it was a stress of the financial burden, but also I did not see myself having to go through getting IVF and then them not having a reason why. There was no answer. The doctor couldn't tell me why. She just said, not sure, but let's just try to get you an embryo. So I was able to, within one round, get a healthy embryo that was genetically viable, and we went through a transfer process, and we transferred a healthy girl embryo at the end of last year, and it was unsuccessful. No implantation, no growth. And so you start feeling like, is there something wrong with me? But I'm realizing within my journey, I didn't want to go through the journey alone. So I bonded with some sister friends who, when I was telling them what I was going through, also shared that they were going through it. And so we started these monthly meetings. And so going through that with a sister circle made it so much more doable. It was empowering. It was something that helped me get through. And none of us had a successful transfer that month. We all got transferred around a week apart from each other, and no one was successful. And it was kind of sad to be in that misery together, but still hopeful that we were going to keep going. We're going to keep trying. My circle and my village they allowed me to be vulnerable, to take off the cape, to set the crown aside, and to be able to just be Tasha. Because I was able to be vulnerable, they helped me be a better me. Like, I feel like so much more of a better woman, a better wife, sister, daughter, mother, doctor, because I understand that vulnerability is also a superpower. What gives me hope in this work is that it's coming full circle. So we used to deliver our own babies in our own communities. But what we're not talking about is that a lot of those babies didn't make it. And so the advancements in science is what we needed to get to a place where those babies make it. And that gives me hope that it's the goal now. It's important. And so I'm excited about us to continue to do this work. I hope that we can be vulnerable together and grow together. We're not stepping on each other, but stepping with, so that we can get to the end goal, the end result, which are healthy Black families and whole birthing persons, like whole people who are healed and well. It's time for new narratives of hope that heal. It's time for us to be seen. It's time for our stories to be heard. Join us. Shine a light on Black birth stories of hope.